Pascal Siakam trade rumors are escalating, and once again, the Toronto Raptors are being linked to the Portland Trailblazers in a potential trade package. So we'll break that all down, including a report that indicates a direction the Toronto Raptors will likely go this summer, which makes sense given all the reports that have recently come out, as well some of the actual moves that we've made. And a guy that's been highly coveted by the Toronto Raptors is now available for a trade. So lots of stuff to break down in this video. Without further ado, let's jump into the first topic of discussion. The first thing we're taking a look at is the Pascal Siakam trade rumors escalating. Now, following this year, this just absolutely disheartening, depressing year as a Toronto Raptors fan, where we had a middle-of-the-pack season. None of our young guys really took any steps forward, and our top guys didn't establish themselves as true number one, deep playoff guys that can drag you to, a Jimmy Butler-esque carry job throughout a series, or even to get you into the playoffs. We didn't have any real exciting storylines. We didn't have anything really juicy to, latch on to as fans. Felt like this team needed a shakeup. The vibes were off, and we did have a major shakeup at the start of this offseason when we fired Nick Nurse, but now it seems like a potential move could be made to the roster regarding Toronto Raptors' best player at the moment in Pascal Siakam. It's basically, this is coming from Draft Express saying that there's a sense the Toronto Raptors could be significant trade players depending on how aggressively they want to get involved with the likes of Pascal Siakam and others. And come, this year's trade deadline, everything that transpired this February or March, whenever the deadline was, about deals that were almost done, all the talks that went down, and Masai Ujiri basically saying, hey, this summer, there are going to be 29 losers, or 28, not including the Toronto Raptors, 28 teams that didn't win a championship, that had disappointing years, that didn't live up to expectations, and they're going to be looking to shake up their team. So players like Pascal, players like OG Anunoby, you'll be able to net more of a return for those guys than teams that are probably feeling decent about themselves halfway through the season when they haven't been knocked out, yet in that year. So I see what Masai Ujiri's saying, and expect trade talks. A lot of Raptors fans expected trade talks to pick back up, and this is what this report from Draft Express is saying. And now, coming from an NBA trade report, just basically a news aggregator, saying that the Portland Trailblazers have serious interest in Toronto Raptors Pascal Siakam. They continue to explore ways to retool the roster around Damian Lillard. Sort of a summary there. NBA trade report, they have a, it's like the Scoop B-esque of sources, so I'm not going to lean too heavily in terms of what they're saying, but actual reports regarding the Portland Trailblazers basically indicated that, hey, they don't want to trade Damian Lillard at this point. They have the 3rd overall pick. However, if they do hold on to that 3rd overall pick, if they hold on to that asset, if they draft Scoot Henderson, basically, and Dame is still on the roster, it's likely they're going to try to make a move there, or Dame will sort of look out, because he's not trying to be on a rebuilding squad this late into his career. But it seems like the direction the Portland Trailblazers want to go is build around Damian Lillard and try to bring in some star players to really elevate that team in the Western Conference, because a lot of teams right now feel like the league is kind of wide open. An 8th seed just made it to the NBA Finals, a 7th seed made it to the Conference Finals. Right, there's all these openings and hype that people feel like if they just had this right roster shakeup. And Pascal Siakam seems like a guy that could be a perfect fit around the Portland Trailblazers, and they have that number 3 asset. And Scoot Henderson, who, if Fred VanVleet is leaving, he would be an awesome addition to this Toronto Raptors team. They have contracts like Anthony Simons that could come in, be added to that deal to make the money work. And Pascal Siakam is going to be sent out to the Portland Trailblazers, and while it's certainly a risk if you're trading away an all-NBA guy in Pascal Siakam for an unproven talent in Scoot Henderson, who some people do peg as a guy that's a legitimate number 1 overall talent in years where Victor Wembanyama isn't there and the Hornets aren't drafting 2nd, right? Then, maybe you push for that deal, especially if you feel like the Toronto Raptors need a shakeup. They need more of a guard presence, and fits the timeline of Scotty Barnes. Now, the fit between Scoot and Scotty could be a little bit weird as they're both not naturally tremendous 3-point shooters, but watching highlights of Scoot Henderson, watching his workouts, looking how strong and athletic this man is, he could be an awesome fit here in Toronto. So I wouldn't be absolutely disappointed if we did get him in return. It would hurt me to see the Toronto Raptors trade away Pascal Siakam. And just to briefly discuss the original report coming from Draft Express and others, the only 2 real trade assets we have this summer is Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. And I guess you could also say, well, Scotty Barnes is just not going to get dealt, but Chris Boucher is a guy that could potentially be dealt. But Gary Trent Jr., Fred VanVleet, and Jakob Poeltl are all guys that are unrestricted free agents. So you're not going to net anything back from them unless you're trying to do a sign-in trade with Fred VanVleet or Gary. But it seems like Hurdle will be re-signed, and we don't really know what's going to happen with Fred or Gary. So if you're making trades, it's going to be Pack or OG. So we'll see what happens on that front. It seems like a lot of things are going to be shaken up, but a report has come out regarding the Toronto Raptors' direction that kind of builds off of what we just spoke about, saying that there's indicates that the Raptors don't want to rebuild. We don't want to completely nuke our roster, and we don't want to sort of go in that direction of completely blowing it up. Now, at surface level, it feels like that might be counterintuitive to these Pascal Siakam reports, but Mark Stein basically came out and said that early signs are emanating from Toronto suggest that the Raptors are not interested in a total rebuild and view this offseason as more plans to retool. So basically what I'm gathering from this is, in all the reports, everything, we're covering new reports every single day on the Raptors Digest here, that the Raptors are open to changing up the roster, a retool. I mean, we fired Nick Nurse, we fired the entire coaching staff. So, the Raptors are certainly retooling the front office, and it feels like they want to retool the players as well, right? We've heard different things regarding Fred VanVleet. Bobby Webster did say some positive stuff in a recent interview regarding Fred, saying they want him back, he's a leader, and all these types of things are on good terms. But we broke that down yesterday, why it still came off as if Fred's likely going to leave, and there's more chatter about Suns, Sixers, Magic, Rockets, pretty well every team, Lakers, every team in the league be interested in Fred VanVleet. So we'll see what happens on that front. But if we're letting Fred walk, potentially make a trade here or there, right? The Raptors can make some serious trades. We have the contracts to do it, right? We have the type of assets to make these types of moves. But we don't want to go in the direction where, hey, we're tanking for the next 3 seasons. We're not rebuilding in terms of, knocking the floor out of our team and just nuking the roster, right? Building Scotty Barnes, tank with Scotty for the next couple seasons. We're not doing it at OKC. We're not doing a mid-2010s Philadelphia 76ers. If the Raptors are trading Pascal Siakam, if they're trading OG, if they're trading these guys, they're going to try to get players back that will still help them compete. Sure, we might take a little dip, or we might, who knows what will actually end up happening, but we'll be retooling the roster in hopes of just shaking things up, doing what the Celtics did a few years back. And obviously they had a nice return drafting Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, but they never overtly tanked, right? They had Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, these types of guys, keeping them around the AC, but they were young, they were exciting. They built a nice core of players that were ready to grow. Whereas the Raptors right now, right, we have a lot of guys that are expecting a lot of money. They're veterans, so they're not really the young guys looking to develop now at this point, right? We have them in their primes, and they couldn't even make the playoffs this most recent season, with the exception of Scotty Barnes. He's not in his prime. So expect the Toronto Raptors to, do a Celtics, do a Miami Heat-esque rebuild. I mean, the Miami Heat, they've had a bunch of just retooling seasons, and they've been in the finals, they've been in the conference finals, 3 of the last 4 seasons, in the finals 2 of those years. So, something like that, I think, is what Masai Ujiri is hoping the Toronto Raptors are able to do, right? Build around Scotty, maybe go a little bit younger. I think trading for Scoot is what a retool would sort of look like. Scoot, some assets coming back to this team, but not trading everybody, trading OG, Pascal, letting Fred, Gary, these guys walk. I think it's more of a retool and still looking to compete for next season. So that might frustrate some Toronto Raptors fans, but I don't know. Let me know your guys' thoughts on that there. But the next thing we're taking a look at is Jonathan Kuminga being available for a trade. Now, for people that don't remember, the Toronto Raptors were very high on potentially trading for Jonathan Kuminga. There's been a lot of reports about us potentially drafting him the year we drafted Scotty Barnes. And this what's it called? Trade deadline, right? We almost traded for him. There was talks about OG going to the Golden State Warriors and Kuminga and assets coming back. The Warriors weren't willing to let go of Kuminga, as he was having a pretty high moments, some good moments throughout this regular season, but it seems that he's frustrated down there with the Golden State Warriors, and report has come out now basically indicating that, the screenshot's not appearing. Yeah, the Golden State Warriors are pursuing a trade for Jonathan Kuminga for a high draft pick. Now, the Toronto Raptors, I don't know how you define high. I don't know how you'd describe that to be, but Kuminga seems frustrated with his current role in the Golden State Warriors. I mean, he's not getting consistent run. He was a bench player for that team, especially in the playoffs, right? He was not given consistent minutes. And you got guys like Draymond Green and Steve Kerr going on the podcast saying, hey, people are complaining about minutes this year. It's a big mess. Championship teams don't do that. The Nuggets, the Heat, they don't have guys complaining on the deep bench. So, kind of throwing shade out there in a little Draymond Green show podcast. But Jonathan Kuminga is available for a first-round pick. The Toronto Raptors are currently drafting with the 13th overall selection. I think that's probably the range that the Golden State Warriors would be willing to trade Kuminga for at this point. I mean, his trade value is just getting worse and worse by the year, and that would be an interesting return for the Toronto Raptors at this year's 13th draft pick. Apparently, the draft is, obviously they always say the top 5 and stuff, the top 4, it's top heavy. They say that every single season, but I've heard this year is not supposed to be horrible for those mid-lottery picks, so we'll see how the Toronto Raptors are sort of scouting at this point, but Jonathan Kuminga for the 13th overall pick, it's definitely a risk, as Jonathan Kuminga certainly had an up and down career with Golden State, but lots of potential certainly there for a guy. It's athletic, can shoot the basketball, he's big, could be a cool fit. So let me know if you guys would be interested in trading the 13th pick for Jonathan Kuminga. Definitely better than trading OG Anunoby, which is the potential deal at this year's trade deadline. The final thing we're taking a look at in this vid is Rico Hynes following Nick Nurse to Philadelphia. Now, we heard yesterday that Rico would be leaving the Toronto Raptors. We're having a clean slate in terms of assistant coaches. Jamal McGlure is gone. Pretty well everyone is just gone from this assistant coaching staff. But news came out from Major Wojnarowski that Rico Hynes is joining the Philadelphia 76ers as an assistant on Nick Nurse's coaching staff. Hynes has been a part of Nurse's staff with the Raptors. Hynes, a former player development coach, has worked with his front of the bench assistant. So, Rico Hynes, he's out there still getting a job and stuff. Again, I said in yesterday's video, I'm not that shook up about Rico Hynes leaving. He's supposed to be a development coach, a development player, and it felt like half our young guys got worse last season, and the players that we're hoping taking major leaps for, I mean, we've trying to drum up the precious propaganda for, we were drumming it up 2 seasons ago, big time, but last season we couldn't get it really rolling too much, and Scotty Barnes didn't take a massive leap forward. So I'm not that shook up that Rico Hynes is leaving. Have fun down there in Philadelphia. It is what it is. But folks, you guys are the best to make this far. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. And, big stuff coming this summer, so we appreciate you guys tuning in all the vids. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.